The Mayday left our flagship at 092 Fleet Standard, and I watched the aiming officer point it at the wrong sector with his own hand. I was 3 paces behind him, holding a slate I would never finish reading, and I saw the targeting glyph snap to Grid Tessin 9 instead of Grid Tessin 2, and I said nothing, because in that instant the deck under us heaved, and the lights browned, and a man I had eaten breakfast with was thrown across the auxiliary console, hard enough to break the rail off its mount. By the time I had my feet again, the call was gone. It was already crossing the dark toward a sector that held no Dominion fleet, no Ascendancy picket, no Allied hull of any kind. It held a single dead patrol grid that nobody had assigned to anyone in 2 centuries. And it held, though none of us knew it yet, a quiet human listening floor that had been keeping that grid since before our charter existed. My name is Corvain Eath. I was an intelligence officer of the Sarn Dominion, second to the flag, and my whole profession was knowing where signals went and who would answer them. That morning I knew neither. The splendor of Arath was breaking apart around me, and the man who should have steadied the Mayday's aim was dead before he could correct it. And I stood in the smoke doing the one thing my training forbade, which was nothing at all. Let me be precise, because precision is what I have left. The Splendor was the Dominion's 3rd-rank command carrier. 11,000 crew, flag of the West March Reserve. We had been crossing the Aerith Reach under tow with 2 of our reactors cold for refit, which is to say we had been crossing it slow and proud and stupid, when a derelict ore platform we had been warned about 3 times slid off its decaying orbit and came down through our screen. Not an attack, not an ambush. A piece of someone else's neglect, 400 years old, large as a moon's tooth, falling into us at a speed that turns metal into weather. The first impact took our forward third. The second took the tow lines. The third, the one that threw my breakfast companion into the rail, took the reactor we had cold and made it briefly very warm. So we screamed for help. That is the honest verb. We screamed. And the officer who aimed the scream put it 1 digit wrong, and I let him, and it went to Tessin 9. Here is the part I have rehearsed 1,000 times in the years since, the part I owe to the record. We were not supposed to be able to call Earth. We had made very sure of that. 4 years before the Splendor died, in a chamber with better light than it deserved, the Dominion's own charter board had voted to strike humanity from the Arath Mutual Aid Compact, not quietly, not by neglect, but by formal motion, with a speech. I was junior then, and I carried the folios. I remember the phrasing because I copied it clean for the archive, that the human worlds, having no standing fleet of consequence and no record of value to the rescue net, were removed from both the giving and the receiving roles of the compact in perpetuity by their own demonstrated irrelevance. Their own demonstrated irrelevance. We struck them off so they could not call us, and so we would never be obliged to answer them, and so we would never owe them anything. We were thorough. We were proud of being thorough. I tell you this now because at 09, 02 our Mayday went to a sector we had decided 4 years earlier did not matter, and the people there had heard us strike them off, and they had kept the floor lit anyway. The bridge of a dying carrier is not loud the way you would think. The alarms cut out early, they are wired to fail-safe, and a hull venting to vacuum is not safe, so they simply stop, and what is left is the wind. Air leaving a ship makes a sound like a held breath that will not end. Under it, the flag captain was giving orders in the flat voice of a man counting how many of us he could keep. I found my station, or what was left of it, and I did the only useful thing an intelligence officer can do in a wreck, which is to listen. I listened to our own Mayday go out, repeat, and go unanswered. The Ascendancy picket that should have been in Tessin 2 was not. We learned later it had been pulled 3 days prior for a border exercise, a fact that had crossed my own desk, that I had filed, that I had not connected because connecting it had not seemed urgent. The nearest Dominion hull of any weight was 19 hours out at flank. 19 hours is a number you give a man so he will stop hoping. The flag captain heard it, and his shoulders did a thing I have only seen twice, both times on men deciding how to die well. Then the comms officer, a young one, Bale, I had recruited her myself out of a signals school for her ear, said, "Sir, we have a return." The bridge went still in the particular way a bridge goes still when hope arrives uninvited. "From the Ascendancy?" the captain said. "No, sir." Beale's hands moved over the panel, and her voice did something I did not like, a small upward catch. "From Tessin 9. The grid the Mayday actually reached. There's a station there. It's answering on a band I don't have in the book. Read it." She read it. "And this is the first thing I will tell you that humans did, and it is a small thing, and it is the thing I think about most. They did not announce themselves. They did not declare a fleet or a name or a flag. The return was 4 words, in trade standard, in a flat synthetic voice that had clearly been waiting a long time to say anything at all. "Aerith floor, we hear you. We hear you. Not we are coming. Not hold on." Just the fact of being heard, stated like a weather report, from a sector we had stricken from existence on purpose 4 years before. I should have felt relief. What I felt, standing in the wind of my dying ship, was the first cold edge of something I did not have a word for yet. The edge that comes when you realize the door you nailed shut has a light on behind it, and someone has been sitting in that light, listening the whole time. The flag captain straightened. Source. I was already pulling it. The intelligence had no entry. The grid Tessin 9 was marked in our books as decommissioned, abandoned at the diaspora's end, value nil. There was a footnote, the kind of footnote you scroll past for a career, that the grid had once held a human secondary listening floor, status presumed lapsed, presumed. We had presumed it lapsed and struck the people who kept it off our rolls in the same decade, and now the presumed lapsed floor was the only thing in the dark that had answered. Sir, I said, and my voice was steadier than I was. It's a human installation. Old. The Aerith floor. I stopped. I made myself say it cleanly, the way I copy things for the archive. We removed them from the compact 4 years ago. They are not obliged. The captain looked at me. He knew the vote. He had not carried the folios, but he knew the vote. Then why are they answering, he said. It was not a question. It was the first time I heard a Dominion officer ask, the thing that would unmake all of us, the thing the rest of this is about. Why are they answering? We struck them off. We made certain they could neither give nor receive. And at 092, by one wrong digit, our scream had gone to the one door in the reach we had personally bolted, and the people behind it had answered before they were even named. Bale's panel chimed again. Second transmission, sir. Longer. They're asking for our manifest. Crew count, casualty count, hull integrity, reactor state. She looked up. Sir, they're not asking who we are. They're asking how many of us are alive. The captain breathed out. Send it. All of it, now. And we sent it. 11,000 aboard, 4,100 unaccounted in the first hour, 2 reactors in cascade. Forward third gone, drifting without tow toward the same decaying field that had killed us. We sent the truth to a station we had erased, because the truth was the only currency we had left, and because some animal part of every crew on that bridge had already decided to hope at the human floor that we had so carefully forbidden ourselves to need. I did not hope. I am an intelligence officer. I added it up. A listening floor is not a fleet. A floor catches signals. It does not haul carriers out of debris fields. Whatever was on Tessin 9 was a room with ears 2 centuries old, run by what? A skeleton watch, an automated routine, a single old human who had not gotten the memo that we had decided he did not matter. The floor could hear us beautifully. The floor could not save us at all. So while the bridge breathed its borrowed hope, I pulled every scrap I had on the Aerith Reach, on the human worlds, on the compact we had gutted, looking for the thing my profession exists to find, what is actually about to happen here. And the more I pulled, the colder I got, because the file kept telling me the same impossible thing. The human worlds had no standing fleet of consequence. We had written that ourselves, in the vote, and it had been true. They had nothing in the reach that could lift us, and yet the floor had answered in 4 words, flat and certain, like a thing that knew it could do something about us. We hear you. At Osine 4, 2 minutes after our Mayday left for the wrong sector, the human floor at Tessin 9 acknowledged the splendor of Aerith by name we had not given it. I logged the timestamp because logging timestamps is the last discipline a drowning officer can keep. 094. Acknowledged. I did not yet know that I would spend the rest of my life inside these 6 minutes between that timestamp and the next one, the one at 0910, when the floor that had heard us so clearly would tell us, just as clearly, the answer we had built 4 years earlier and forgotten we had built. But that comes later. First, I have to tell you what the floor did in those 6 minutes, and what one old human voice on a dead grid did with 11,000 of us in his ears, and how I, who had carried the folios that struck him off, sat in the wind of my ship and watched the door I had bolted swing slowly, deliberately, and entirely on its own terms open. The third transmission from the floor came at 095, and it changed the shape of the room. Splendor of Arath, hold attitude. You are spinning. Your bow debris is masking your aft section from your own field watch. We have a cleaner picture than you do. Stand by for a vector. The flag captain looked at the helm. The helm officer looked at his board, and his face went slack, because the human was right. We were spinning, a slow, ugly roll the ship's own gutted sensors had been smoothing out of our display, and the floor, a room of ears 2 centuries away, had read it off our raw signal and seen the thing our bridge could not see about itself. That is what a listening floor does. It does not save you. It hears you better than you hear yourself. How, the captain said, to no one. How do they have a cleaner picture? Because they've been pointed at this sector for 200 years, and we've been pointed at it for 9 minutes, I said. I did not mean it to come out as bitter as it did. Bell raised a hand. Vectors in, sir. They want us to bleed the roll using the number 2 attitude bank, the one we have left. They've sent the firing sequence. Sir, it's already timed to our tumble. They calculated our spin rate from the Doppler on our own Mayday. The captain did not hesitate. Executed their sequence. We executed a human's firing solution on a Dominion warship fed to us from a station we had decided did not exist. And the roll bled off. And for the first time since the platform came down through us, the stars outside stopped smearing. A small cheer went up at the aft stations. I did not join it. I was watching the timestamps. 095 vector received. 096 roll arrested. The floor was helping us with a precision that no skeleton watch and no dead automation could manage, and that meant there was a mind on Tessin 9, awake, fast, and entirely uninterested in telling us its name. I want to be exact about what I felt, because the record deserves it, and because I have had years, to be honest. I did not feel saved. I felt handled. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of this story. A drowning man who is thrown a rope feels saved. A drowning man who is being measured, who feels competent hands taking his pulse and reading his lungs and deciding something about him that he is not party to, that man feels handled. The floor at Tessin 9 was not rescuing the splendor. The floor was assessing the splendor, and I, whose profession is assessment, knew the feel of being assessed the way a hunter knows the feel of a sight settling on his own back. Bail, I said quietly, off the command channel, what else are they asking for? She kept her voice low to match mine. That's the thing, sir. After the manifest, they stopped asking us things. They went quiet for 90 seconds. Then they started asking other people things. Other people. There's traffic on their band I can't fully read, but I can read the headers. They're hailing outward. Not toward the Dominion. Toward, she frowned at the board, toward a cluster of small signals about 40 light minutes forward of us. Faint ones. Civilian carrier tone. 3 of them, maybe 4. I felt the cold sharpen. Show me the cluster. She put it on my secondary. 4 signals, weak, drifting, in the dead space forward. And the moment I saw their drift, I knew exactly what they were, because I had filed the order that put them there. They were the Velish barges, refugee barges. 16,000 civilians off a failed colony world the Dominion had folded the year before, parked in the Aerith dead space under a standing tow contract, while the bureaucracy decided which marginal world would absorb them. Their tow had been canceled 6 weeks ago in a budget revision. I had initialed the revision. I had initialed it the way you initial 40 things before lunch, and the barges had been sitting in the dead space ever since, slow dying on reserve power, beneath the notice of a Dominion that had more pressing carriers to crew. The platform that killed us had come down through their parking field first. Of course it had. The same decaying orbit, the same neglect, 400 years old. It had grazed the barges on its way to us, and the barges, gutted, half-powered 16,000 souls, had also screamed. And their scream, unlike ours, had gone exactly where they aimed it. At the Dominion relay, the correct recipient, the proper channel. And the Dominion relay had logged it and done nothing, because a refugee barge with a canceled tow contract is not a flagged asset. Sir, Beale said. Very carefully, the floor isn't talking to us anymore. The floor is talking to the barges. I understood then, in the wind of my dying ship, the first true shape of what was happening, and it was worse than dying. The human floor had 2 screams in its ears that morning. Or's 11,000 crew on a third-rank flag carrier, the pride of the Westmarch Reserve, sent to the wrong sector by 1 wrong digit. And theirs, 16,000 civilians on 4 dying barges, sent correctly to the people who were supposed to care for them, ignored. The floor was deciding between us, and it had stopped asking us questions. Get me the captain, I said. I crossed the canted deck to him, past the burn teams and the wounded and the smell of a ship that is no longer airtight, and I told him, lo, what I had found. The barges. The canceled tow. The 4 civilian signals the floor was now hailing instead of us. I watched him understand it the way I had, that we were no longer alone in the human's ears, and that the company we were keeping was 16,000 people the Dominion had already decided, on paper, not to save. They wouldn't, the captain said, choose barges over a flag carrier. No fleet on the line would. Tonnage, crew value, strategic weight. He stopped, because he heard himself reciting the exact logic of the vote that had struck the humans off, and he knew the humans had heard that logic too, 4 years ago, and had built whatever they were about to do with full knowledge of it. At 097, the floor came back to us. Beale read it in the flat human cadence she had started unconsciously to imitate. Splendor of Arath. Question. You are a Dominion command carrier. Confirm your charter standing under the Arath Mutual Aid Compact. Specifically, confirm your worlds standing on the receiving roll. We show a flag on this file. Confirm or correct. The bridge went very quiet. Beale turned and looked at me, because Beale knew what flag was on that file. Half the bridge knew. The vote had been 4 years ago, but it had been a speech, and speeches travel. They're asking us, I said slowly, to confirm whether we struck ourselves off their list. Why would they ask that? The captain said. If they're already helping us. And I gave him the answer that I have given a tribunal, a war college, and the inside of my own skull every night since. Because they aren't helping us, sir. They're verifying us. A floor that good doesn't ask a question it doesn't already know the answer to. They have the vote. They have the speech. They have our own words about their irrelevance, copied clean, probably in better archive than we kept. They're not asking because they need the data. They're asking because they want us on the record, on our own Mayday channel, to say it ourselves. The captain's jaw worked, say what ourselves. That 4 years ago, we removed our own worlds from the rolls so that we would never have to answer theirs. And that we are now, this morning, asking them to answer ours anyway. The wind sang through the breached hull. Somewhere aft a bulkhead gave with a sound like a struck bell. 11,000 of us, drifting, spinning no longer, held in the steady, competent ears of a station we had erased. And the station had just, with perfect courtesy, asked us to read our own erasure into the record before it decided what we were worth. Don't answer it, the captain said. Sir, don't answer it. Stall. Ask them their intentions. Ask them their assets. Find out what they actually have out there before he gestured, a sharp, helpless motion. Before we put our neck on their block voluntarily. It was a sound instinct. It was the instinct of a man who has negotiated for hull and crew his whole life. And it was, I understood even then, exactly the wrong move, because you do not stall a floor that has been listening to your sector for 200 years. You do not bluff a recipient who already holds the document. But he was the flag, and I carried out his order, and I told Beale to send back a request for the floor's identity, its assets, and its intentions. A polite, professional stall. The floor's reply came in 19 seconds. It was, I think, the fastest the human floor ever answered us, and it was the answer of something that had been waiting 4 years for a Dominion ship to try exactly this. Splendor of Aerith, we have your charter file, we have your world standing, we are not asking for information. We are offering you the chance to confirm it before we proceed. You have until 0910, floor out. 0910, 3 minutes. The floor had given us a deadline, the way you give a deadline to a vendor, not to a victim. And then it had gone back to talking to the barges, and left 11,000 Dominion crew to sit with the fact that the door we had bolted 4 years ago was now, very politely, telling us it would decide what to do with us in exactly 3 minutes, with or without our cooperation, and that our cooperation was a courtesy it was extending to us, not the other way around. I looked at the timestamp, 7. I looked at the captain, who had gone gray, and I did the thing my whole profession had trained me for and that I had never once had to do for my own survival. I started, very fast, to think about what the humans were actually about to do, and the conclusion I reached in those 3 minutes is the reason I am the one telling this and not him. Here's what I worked out in those 3 minutes, on a slate with a cracked corner in the wind of my ship. The floor was not a fleet, I had confirmed that. A listening floor cannot lift a carrier. But a listening floor that good, fast enough to read our spin off our Doppler, archived enough to hold our charter vote, awake enough to hail 4 barges and us in the same minute, a floor that good is not the asset. A floor that good is a node. It is a switchboard. The question was never what the floor could do. The question was what the floor could call. And it had already shown me, by hailing the barges, that it was not just receiving. It was routing. So I stopped asking what was on Tessin 9 and started asking what Tessin 9 was connected to. I pulled the old diaspora network maps, the ones we kept for completeness and never read. The human secondary listening floors were not isolated. They had been built as a web, a quiet, redundant mesh strung across the reach before the human worlds withdrew inward, each floor able to wake the next, each able to forward a verified distress down a chain to whatever human hull still kept a contract with the mesh. Most of the mesh was presumed dead, presumed, the same word. And if even one human hull anywhere in the reach still answered the mesh, one freighter, one survey ship, one old patrol vessel running a route nobody had canceled, then the floor at Tessin 9 was not a room with ears, it was a phone. And it had been quietly dialing since 095. I told the captain. I told him we were not being assessed by a station. We were being assessed by a network, and the station was the part of the network polite enough to talk to us, while the rest of it decided what to send and where. I told him that the question on our deadline, confirm your charter standing, was not a courtesy and was not cruelty. It was a routing decision. The mesh had 2 verified distress calls in the reach this morning. It had finite hulls, and it was about to allocate them, and the charter standing of each caller was a variable in the allocation. They're going to weigh us against the barges, the captain said. No, sir, I said. I think they already have. I think the deadline isn't them deciding. I think the deadline is them giving us a chance to change the answer before they act on it. And I think the only thing that changes the answer is whether we Right now, on this channel, restore the barges to the roles we struck them off of, or restore ourselves, or both, or neither. I did not understand yet how exactly right I was. I understood enough to be afraid of the next 3 minutes in a way the impact had not made me afraid. The captain made his choice. I will not pretend it was a small one or an easy one, and I will not pretend now that it was the wrong one for the man he was. He said, restore us. Send the floor a charter amendment under my flag authority, emergency provision, restore the Dominion worlds to the receiving role of the compact, effective immediately, my seal. We have 11,000. The barges have 16,000 civilians, but they are not crew and they are not He stopped, and I watched him decline to finish the sentence the vote had taught him to finish. Send the amendment. Restore us, now. Bale sent it. The flag captain of the Splendor of Aerith, in the 8th minute of his ship's death, used his emergency authority to reverse, for himself, the exact exclusion the Dominion had voted on the humans 4 years before. To put his own worlds back on the human rescue rolls so that the humans would lift his carrier. It was legal. It was within his authority. It was, I think, the most human thing any of us did that morning, and I do not mean that as praise. The floor's reply came at 099, 1 minute before the deadline. Beale read it, and her voice did the upward catch again, and this time she did not stop it. Splendor of Aerith. Amendment received. Note for your record. Your emergency provision restores your worlds to the receiving role. It does not restore the Velish barges, whose standing your worlds revoked in the same session 4 years ago by the same authority. We hold that document also. The barges remain struck off your rolls. You have restored yourselves and not them. We have noted this. Floor out. The bridge was silent. The captain had restored us and not the barges, because the barges had not been the question he was answering, and the floor had simply, flatly, read his omission back to him as a fact, not an accusation. A fact logged, with a timestamp, and I understood finally fully the thing the humans had built in those minutes, and it was not mercy and it was not vengeance. It was a mirror. The floor had taken our own machinery, our roles, our votes, our seals, our perpetual by their own irrelevance language, and it had simply agreed to operate it, exactly as written. We had built a charter that decided who was worth saving by formal vote. The humans had read the charter, accepted it, and were now executing it to the letter. The barges were off the rolls. We had restored ourselves. The humans would honor the rolls, all of them, including the line we had just declined to fix. Send another amendment, I said. Restore the barges. My recommendation, Captain, formally, on the record, restore the barges. The captain looked at me. He was a good officer and a tired one, and he had just spent his emergency authority, saving 11,000 of his own. We don't have time to negotiate 16,000 strangers onto a human list before they pull us out, he said. Restore the barges, and we've doubled the demand on whatever they're sending. We could lose our own window. I'm not gambling 11,000 crew on charity for civilians the Dominion already wrote off. The amendment stands as sent. Sir, I don't think they're going to pull us out at all. He stared at me. They acknowledged the amendment. They acknowledged that we restored ourselves. They didn't acknowledge that they'd lift us. I pointed at the timestamp. Sir, look at what they actually said in 9 minutes. They said, we hear you. They said, hold attitude. They asked our manifest. They asked our charter standing. They gave us a deadline. They noted our omission. At no point, not once, did the floor say a hull is inbound. We have been assuming rescue because rescue is what we screamed for. The humans have not once promised it. 9-9 became 9-10 while I was still speaking. And at 0910, on the second, the floor came back. Bale read it. I have it copied clean. I will give it to you as it came, because nothing I could write is heavier than what the human floor actually said. Splendor of Aerith. This is the Aerith floor, human secondary listening grid, 206 years on station. We acknowledge your Mayday. We acknowledge your amendment, restoring your worlds to the receiving role. We have weighed your call. 4 years ago, your worlds removed the human worlds from both the giving and the receiving roles of this compact, in perpetuity, by formal vote, citing our irrelevance. We were on station when that vote crossed this floor. We logged it. We did not contest it. A role is a role. We have kept it. You are asking the giving role for help. We are no longer on the giving role. You took us off it yourselves. We are honoring your document. We will not be sending a hull to the Splendor of Aerith. We hold no obligation to your flag by your own perpetual provision, and we do not extend obligations we are not asked to extend by parties who remove themselves from the asking. You wrote that we cannot give. We are not giving. Your nearest Dominion hull is 19 hours out. We have rebroadcast your exact position and state to your own fleet on your own. Emergency band, cleanly in full so that no failure of routing can be laid at our floor. Your fleet has your Mayday. The choice to come is theirs. It was always theirs. We have made certain they cannot say they did not hear. We heard you. We are declining. The roll is yours. Floor out. I have read that transmission to a tribunal. I have read it to a war college. I read it once to my own daughter when she was old enough to ask why I left the service. And every time I reach the 4 words in the middle of it, we are honoring your document. The room does the thing the bridge did, which is go completely, perfectly still because there is no answer to it. There is no answer to a creditor who has read your contract more carefully than you have and is simply, calmly, holding you to it. The flag captain of the Splendor of Aerith sat down, not from a wound. He sat down because the floor had just declined to save 11,000 of us, citing our own law, and there was no order to give that the floor would recognize because we had spent 4 years making certain the floor owed us nothing, and the floor had agreed. They can't, he said. I restored the worlds. I put us back on the receiving roll, Bale answered, because I could not. Sir, she said very quietly, they're not on the giving roll. You put us back on the list of who can be helped. You didn't put them back on the list of who has to help. Those are 2 different rolls. We struck both. You only restored one. We had unmade the wrong half of our own cruelty. And the humans who had kept the document knew exactly which half. The flag captain did not waste the silence. He was a flag officer of the Westmarch Reserve. And whatever the floor had just done to us, there were 9,000 living crew on the canted decks who did not yet know they had been declined, and a flag officer's first duty in a decline is to keep them alive long enough to be wrong about it. Damage, he said. Real numbers now. The damage control officer gave them, and they were bad. The forward third was gone and would not be coming back. The 2 reactors we had carried cold for refit were no longer the problem. The problem was the third, the one that had briefly gone warm, which was now bleeding neutrons into the keel at a rate that gave us, by the engineer's flat estimate, somewhere between 3 and 5 hours before the spine itself began to fail. 3 and 5 hours. The floor had told us a Dominion hull was 19 hours out. The arithmetic of it sat on the bridge like a 4th casualty. We would not last to 19 hours. We had screamed at the wrong sector, been heard, been declined, and even the decline had given us a number we could not survive. Engineer, the captain said, can we move? Under our own power, sir. No. We have attitude banks and nothing else. We can point the wreck. We can't push it. Then we point it. The captain looked at the field beyond the dead viewport, the same decaying debris field that had birthed the platform that killed us. We are drifting back into the field that did this. Point us out of it. If we're going to sit 3 hours for a fleet that isn't coming, I won't have us sit in the path of the next falling thing. Bale, log it. Note that we maneuvered to clear the hazard. If anyone survives to read the log, they'll know we kept working. It was a small thing, pointing a dying wreck out of a debris field with the last of its attitude fuel, and it is the kind of small thing that I have come to understand is the whole of what competence is. The humans, 2 centuries away, were doing the same kind of small thing, reading our spin, hailing the barges, holding the document, and the gap between us was not that they were heroes and we were villains. The gap was that they had been doing the small competent thing, on station, for 200 years, without an audience, for a sector that had voted them irrelevant, and we had been doing it for 9 minutes because we were dying. Competence under a clock is survival. Competence without one for 2 centuries, for people who will never thank you, is something else. I did not have the word for it then. I am not sure I have it now. While we cleared the hazard, I kept reading the mesh, because reading was the one thing I could still do that mattered, and because I could not stop. The floor had gone quiet to us, but it had not gone quiet. It was loud now on every dead band in the book, and I watched it work, and the more I watched, the more I understood that we had not been declined by a station. We had been declined by an institution, and the institution was vast and old and entirely indifferent to whether we'd admired it. Beale, I said. How many nodes? She had been counting. 9, sir. 9 human listening floors on the mesh, just in the Aerith reach, just the ones close enough to handshake. All dead listed in our book. All live. They're passing the barge distress between them like, she searched for it, like a watch passing a lantern down a wall. Each one confirms it heard, confirms the next one heard, confirms the hull is moving. It's redundant. It's deliberately redundant. They built it so that no single floor going dark could lose a call. 9 floors. We had struck the human worlds off the rolls 4 years ago on the strength of my own assessment that they maintained no fleet of consequence, and I had been right, and I had been an idiot, because I had been counting hulls. The humans had not built a fleet. They had built a nervous system. 9 floors in one reach, 100 across the old diaspora map for all I knew, each one a node that had been quietly listening, confirming, passing the lantern for the entire 4 years since we declared them not worth listening to. You cannot vote a nervous system irrelevant. You can only fail to notice you are inside its reach. Get me a count on how far the mesh extends, I told her. Past the reach. I want to know how big this thing actually is that we call dead. She worked it for 2 minutes, and then she stopped working it and looked at me, and her face had the careful blankness of an officer who has found something above her clearance and knows it. Sir, I can't see the edge. The handshake tones don't stop at the reach. They keep going coreward and rimward, and I lose them past my receiver's range, but they don't stop. Whatever this is, it's bigger than the Aerith reach. It might be bigger than I can measure from here. I sat with that. A human network we had pronounced dead, spanning at least a reach and possibly far more. Every node listening, every node confirming, none of it obliged to us, all of it having heard 4 years ago that we considered it irrelevant, and having simply continued, not in protest, not in spite. The floor had told us why in 3 words I had not yet fully understood. It is what we are. The humans had not kept the mesh lit to prove a point to the Dominion. They had kept it lit, because keeping it lit was the thing they were, and a thing that is what it is does not need your vote, and cannot be diminished by it, and will be there, listening, when your charter is a footnote and your reserve is scrap. Sir, Beale said suddenly, and her voice changed. New traffic. The floor's hailing inward again, toward us. No, not us. Towards something between us and the barges. There's a 5th signal I missed, small. Very faint. It's in the debris field. It's a lifeboat. A Dominion lifeboat, one of ours. From the forward third before it tore away. There are people in the field I had not known. The forward third had gone in the first impact, and we had written off everyone in it, the way you write off a third of your ship in the first 30 seconds, because you have to or you stop functioning. But a lifeboat had launched, in those 30 seconds, from a section we had already mourned, and it was in the debris field with a fading beacon, and our own bridge had not heard it because our own sensors were gutted, and our own attention was on our own survival. The floor had heard it. Of course the floor had heard it. Are they hailing it or are they hailing us about it? I said. Both, sir. Bell, read it. And read it again. They're vectoring the lifeboat. They're talking it through the field. They're telling 40 of our crew how to thread a debris field they can't see, in real time, off the lifeboat's own beacon Doppler, the same way they read our spin. Sir, the floor declined the Splendor. The floor is still saving the Splendor's lifeboat. And there it was again. The thing I could not make fit, the thing that took me 9 years to stop fighting. The floor had declined us flatly by our own law, citing our own document, and the floor was at that exact moment threading 40 of our own people through a debris field, gently, expertly, off a fading beacon, asking nothing. Because a lifeboat is not a flag and 40 crew in the dark are not a charter question. They were a scream. And a thing with ears hears a scream, and the roll only governs what you do after. And what the floor did after hearing 40 of our people was the same thing it did after hearing 16,000 of the barges. It acted with a competence that asked no permission, while it declined the one caller it was entitled to decline. I understood then that the decline had never been about whether the humans would help. The humans helped reflexively, constantly, at every scale, the lifeboat and the barges and our own spin, the way water finds level. The decline was about one specific thing and one only, whether the Dominion's flag would receive, on demand, the institutional rescue it had voted itself the right to refuse to others. The floor would thread our lifeboat and shame our fleet and read our spin all day long. What it would not do was let a carrier that had erased the giving roll cash in on the giving roll. It would save every human scale scream in the sector. It would not save the document we had written to avoid saving anyone. That is a finer distinction than any board in the Dominion was built to hold. I have spent 9 years holding it. I am still not sure I hold it correctly. But I know it is the true shape of what happened in the Arath Reach that morning, and I know that the 40 crew in that lifeboat lived, threaded out of the field by a voice from a station we erased, and that not one of them, to this day, was ever told they were rescued by a network the Dominion had declined. For 90 seconds, the bridge of the Splendor of Arath was the quietest place I have ever stood, and I have stood in tombs. Then Bale said, Sir, the floor's traffic spiked, outward. Toward the barges, I said, toward the barges. She had her whole hand against the panel now, as if she could feel the signals through the glass. And towards her, the mesh just lit up. The old mesh. I'm reading handshake tones on 6 different diaspora frequencies, all dead listed in our book, all live. The floor isn't dialing one hull. It's dialing the whole chain. I pulled it onto my secondary and watched the thing I had reasoned out in the abstract become real on a screen. The Arath floor was not a room with ears. It was the near end of a network we had pronounced dead, and it was waking the network up, node by node, the way you wake a watch you have kept for 2 centuries against exactly this morning. Each node answered. Each node passed the call coreward, and somewhere out in the dead space beyond the barges, on the far end of the chain, something answered that was not a floor. I have a hull. Beale breathed. I have a real hull. Carrier tone, human signature moving. It just came up on the mesh 40 light minutes coreward, and it's already under power toward the barge cluster. What is it? The captain said. He had risen from where he sat. Whatever was about to happen, as the officer in him could not stop reading the board. What hull? How big? I can't size it from here, sir. The mesh is encrypted past the headers. But the drive tone, she stopped. Sir, that's a heavy drive tone. That's not a freighter. That's not a survey ship. Whatever's on the far end of the human floor's phone, it's big, and it's already moving, and it's not moving toward us. It's moving toward the barges. The flag captain stood in the wreck of his command and watched a human warship. That is what it was. I am certain of it now, though we never got a clean silhouette. Answer a call from a dead network and turn towards 16,000 refugees the Dominion had canceled, while 11,000 of his own crew drifted 19 hours from any help, declined on the record by the floor that had routed it. I want to slow here, because this is the hinge of everything, and I have spent years making sure I understand it correctly. The humans had 2 distress calls. They answered one. They did not flip a coin, and they did not weigh tonnage, and they did not, I am quite sure, feel one moment of the vengeance we kept waiting for them to feel. They simply read both files. Our file said, these worlds removed themselves from the rolls, perpetually by their own vote, citing the human world's irrelevance. The barge file said, these 16,000 were removed from the rolls by the Dominion against their own will, parked, canceled, and abandoned. One file was a party that had opted out of the system and was now demanding the system serve it. The other was a party the system had failed. The humans were not on the giving roll for the Dominion had seen to that. But the humans had never needed to be on any Dominion roll to answer the barges, because the barges had not removed anyone from anything. The barges had simply screamed correctly to the people responsible for them and been ignored, and a scream that goes unanswered by the responsible party becomes, on the old human mesh, exactly the kind of orphan distress those floors were built to catch. The barges were not a charter question. The barges were the thing the floor existed for, and the Splendor, the proud third-rank flag, the pride of the West March Reserve, the Splendor was a charter question, and we had personally written the clause that resolved it against us. They're saving the barges, the captain said. It was not quite a question. He was watching the carrier tone track forward, steady, unhurried, certain. They declined us, and they're saving the barges. Yes, sir. The barges are off the rolls. The barges were taken off the rolls, sir. We took ourselves off. That's the line the floor is reading. You can be helped if you were failed by the system. You can't be helped if you fired yourself from it and then demanded it serve you anyway. We're the second kind. We made very sure to be the second kind. He turned on me then, and there was no anger in it, which was worse than anger. You carried the folios, he said. 4 years ago. You copied the vote clean for the archive. You're the one who told me, just now, what the rolls meant. Did you know? When we struck them off. Did you know it could come back like this? I could have lied. I am an intelligence officer. Lying cleanly is a skill I keep sharp. But the floor had spent 10 minutes teaching the entire bridge what it costs to hold a document more carefully than the party who signed it, and I found I did not want to be the kind of man the floor would have to read back to himself. No, sir, I said. I knew it was thorough. I was proud it was thorough. I did not know thorough was a thing that could be turned around and pointed at us. I thought a list of who we did not have to save was a list of our freedoms. I did not understand it was also a list of who did not have to save us. Nobody in that chamber understood it, including me, especially me. The captain looked at the board a long moment. Then he did the thing that, of everything that happened on the Splendor of Arath, I respect most, and it is the reason I can tell this without only contempt for us. Bale, he said, open the channel to the floor. Sir, open it. I'm not going to beg them. I'm going to do my job. He squared himself, what was left of him, in front of the dead viewport. Arath floor, this is the flag of the Splendor of Arath. We acknowledge your decline. We do not contest it. You have honored our document, and we have no standing to object to our own law. But I am amending the compact again, now, under my flag authority, and I want this on your record and on ours. Emergency provision, Second Amendment, my seal. The Velish barges and their 16,000 civilians are restored to all roles of the Arath Mutual Aid Compact, giving and receiving, effective immediately and not subject to revocation by budget revision, fleet order, or vote of convenience. Their standing was taken from them against their will, and I am giving it back. This amendment carries no condition. It does not ask you for anything. I am not trading it for my ship. I am restoring those people to the roles because they should never have been struck from them, and because I would rather the last lawful act of this carrier be that one than the one I sent you 9 minutes ago. The Splendor of Arath stands by its First Amendment for itself and adds this for them. Do with it what your roles require. Flag out. He had restored the barges. With no condition, expecting nothing. A dying man putting 16,000 strangers back on a list he could no longer benefit from because the human floor had spent 10 minutes showing him exactly what a role was for, and he had at the very end finally learned to read his own. The floor was quiet for 11 seconds. Then it answered, and for the first time the flat human voice carried something underneath the flatness, something I have never been able to name and have stopped trying to. Splendor of Arath. Second Amendment received and logged. Note for your record, the Velish barges did not require your amendment to be answered. They were already on our floor as an orphan distress, and a hull is already inbound to them, and that hull was dispatched before your amendment was sent. You have restored nothing we needed restored. But you restored it anyway, asking nothing, at the end for people who could do nothing for you. We have logged that too. A floor keeps everything. We will keep that. Stand by, Splendor of Arath. Floor out. Stand by. Not we are coming, not we have changed our minds. Just stand by. The flag captain looked at me and I looked at the timestamp 09 Thurn, and neither of us knew what standby meant from a floor that had declined us. 3 minutes before, and now for the first time had not closed the door all the way. We stood by. 11,000 of us drifting, declined, with a human warship racing the wrong way toward the barges we had finally remembered to save, and a 200-year-old voice on a dead grid telling us to wait, with no promise attached, while the network we had pronounced irrelevant decided, on its own terms, in its own time, what to do with the empire that had erased it. The lifeboat reached us at 09:39, 40 crew, threaded out of the debris field by the floor's voice, and the way they came aboard told me more about the humans than any transmission. They came aboard frightened in the wrong direction. I expected men relieved to be back on the flag. Instead, they came through the airlock looking back over their shoulders at the dark, and the first of them, a young rating with a burned-down one arm, said to the deck officer, "Sir," the voice, the one in the boat. "Is it still? Is it ours?" Whose voice was that? Because the floor had talked them through the field in trade standard, flat and patient, and none of them had recognized the band, and 40 Dominion crew had just been saved by a voice they could not place. From a direction they had been taught held nothing, and it had unsettled them more than the dying had. There is a particular fear in being helped by something you cannot account for. I had felt it on the bridge at N0902. The lifeboat crew wore it on their faces. It is, I think, the specific fear this niche of event produces, the fear of the answered call you did not aim at anyone. And I have come to think the humans know it produces that fear, and answer flatly and without flourish precisely to soften it, the way you speak low and even to a spooked animal. The deck officer told them the truth because the captain had ordered the truth told to everyone now. He said it was a human listening floor. 200 years on station. The Dominion struck them off the rolls 4 years ago. They heard our Mayday by accident and threaded your boat out anyway. And the young rating with the burned arm was quiet a moment and then said the thing that I have thought about more than almost anything else from that morning. He said, "We struck them off and they pulled us out, and they're not even going to tell us their name." He was not angry. He was 18, or whatever the human equivalent is, and he had just learned, in a lifeboat in one morning, the lesson it took the whole Dominion and inquiry in a war college to refuse to learn, that the people you erase do not stop being people, and that a thing that helps you while asking nothing and claiming nothing has a kind of power that no flag and no fleet and no vote can match, the terrible quiet power of needing nothing from you at all. I went down to the casualty deck while we waited, because I could not sit on the bridge reading a rescue I was not part of, and because I wanted to see the ship the floor had declined. 9,400 living by then, spread across decks that were no longer airtight, breathing bottled air, waiting on a clock the engineer kept revising. The casualty deck was where the morning's full arithmetic lived. I will not catalog it. I will tell you only that I found among the wounded the aiming officer's second, the man who had been at the targeting stations with him, who had survived when his senior did not, and who knew, as I knew, that the Mayday had gone to Tessin 9 by one wrong digit of his dead colleague's hand. He had worked it out. Of course he had. He looked up at me from the deck with a field dressing across half his face, and he said, "Sir, if he'd aimed it right, if it had gone to Tessin 2 like it was supposed to, there was no picket there. The ascendancy picket was pulled 3 days ago. If he'd aimed it right, we'd have screamed at an empty grid and died, and no one would have heard at all." He laughed once, a terrible sound through the dressing. He aimed it wrong, and it saved the barges. He aimed it wrong, and it threaded the lifeboat. He aimed it wrong, and it's bringing the East March cruiser. The one mistake, the one wrong digit. It's the only reason any of this. He stopped. He could not finish it. I could not finish it for him. I have thought about the wrong digit for 9 years, and I have come to believe it is the heart of the whole matter, and that the humans understand it better than we do. We screamed at the right sector, correctly by the book at the ascendancy picket, and the right sector was empty and the book was wrong, and correctness would have killed us. We screamed at the wrong sector by error by one dead man's flinching hand, and the wrong sector held a floor that had been listening for 200 years for exactly the scream nobody aimed at it. The barges screamed correctly at the proper recipient, the Dominion relay, and correctness got them 6 weeks of slow dying and a cancellation. The error reached the humans. The error always reaches the humans in these stories, and I think the reason is not luck. I think the reason is that the humans are the ones who chose to be reachable by error, who kept a floor lit on a dead grid, who staffed a comfort band, who answered the mesh, who built a nervous system whose entire purpose was to catch the screams that went to the wrong place, because the right place, the proper recipient, the obliged party, so reliably fails. The humans are not where the correct call goes. The humans are where the misrouted call lands. They built themselves deliberately over centuries into the catch net under the galaxy's drop calls. You cannot aim at them. You can only miss everyone else and find them waiting. I went back to the bridge. The barges were under tow by then. Bale narrated the last of it, the 16,000 carrier tones stabilizing one by one as the human warship fed them power. And I stood at my ruined station and watched the human floor do a thing I had not anticipated, a thing that escalated the morning past rescue into something I can only call instruction. It began rebroadcasting our charter vote, not to us, to our fleet. On every band, alongside our position and our state, the floor appended the full text of the Dominion's 4-year-old motion striking, "The human worlds from the rolls," our own words citing the human world's irrelevance, removed from giving and receiving in perpetuity, and it appended it with a single line of its own, flat, procedural, for the duty officer's context. The party now requesting rescue is the party that authored the attached. The human floors are not on the giving roll for this party by this document. We are rebroadcasting the requesting party's position regardless, that the requesting party's own fleet may not claim it could not hear. Floor out. The floor was not shaming us to our fleet. It was worse than that, and better. It was giving our fleet the context to shame itself. It had handed our own duty officers the document and the Mayday side by side and said, in effect, "Here is the empire that voted the listeners irrelevant, screaming at the listeners, and here is us listening anyway and routing it to you, and now you know exactly what you are choosing if you choose not to come." It had made it impossible for the East March line to plead ignorance and impossible to plead the charter, because the charter said only that the humans could not give, and the humans were not giving, they were telling, and there is no clause anywhere that lets a fleet refuse to hear its own carrier dying because a third party rebroadcast the position too clearly. The East March cruiser broke formation 11 minutes after the floor began that rebroadcast. I do not think it was a coincidence. I think a duty officer somewhere on that cruiser read the Dominion's own vote, appended to the Dominion's own carrier's Mayday, by the listeners the Dominion had erased, and understood that history was being written in real time with timestamps, and that the timestamp of when his fleet chose to move would be in it forever. The humans had not sent a ship. They had made our fleet's cowardice legible, and a fleet can survive many things but not being legibly cowardly with timestamps, and so it came. 3 hours and 40 minutes, not 19, not because the humans gave, because the humans told the truth so loudly and so precisely that the lie became unsurvivable. That is the most dangerous thing I learned that morning, and I learned it as an intelligence officer, which made it worse. The thing you cannot vote away is not the human's obligation. We voted that away cleanly. The thing you cannot vote away is the human's hearing, and a witness who hears everything, and will tell everyone, flatly, with timestamps, asking nothing is more powerful than any fleet, because a fleet can be deterred, and a witness who needs nothing from you cannot be. We had not made an enemy at Tessin 9, we had made a record. And the record does not negotiate. The barges were saved first, and we watched it happen, and it remains the strangest rescue I have ever witnessed because we were not part of it. The human hull reached the Velish cluster at 0931. By then, the Splendor had lost another bulkhead and 140 more of our people, and the floor had gone silent on us entirely. Its whole attention turned coreward, and we had nothing to do but read the mesh and watch other people be saved on a band we had no right to. Beale pulled what she could off the headers and narrated it in a low voice, half to me and half to herself, the way a person narrates a thing they cannot believe they are seeing. The human warship did not slow to assess the barges. It had already assessed them. The floor had fed it everything, the way the floor had read our spin off our Doppler, so the hull arrived already knowing which barge was venting and which was dark and how many breaths were left on each. It came in fast and it came in heavy, and it did the thing that a listening floor cannot do and that we had assumed nothing in the reach could do for Us. It grappled all 4 barges at once. 4 dying civilian hulls, 16,000 souls, taken under tow by a single human warship that had answered a phone on a dead network and crossed 40 light minutes to do it. That's not a rescue ship, Bale whispered. Sir, look at the tow profile. That's a warship using its combat tractors. Those are made to drag a crippled enemy out of a line so you can board it. They're using boarding tractors to carry refugees. I had filed reports in my career on human hull design. I had written in one of them the assessment that informed the vote that the human worlds maintain no standing fleet of consequence. I had been correct in the narrow way that intelligence is often correct and useless. The humans had no fleet of consequence. They had a mesh, 2 centuries of patient listening, and apparently 1 warship somewhere in the reach that kept a contract with the mesh nobody had thought to cancel. And that 1 warship, used the way it was being used, was worth more to 16,000 abandoned civilians than the entire West March Reserve had been, because the West March Reserve had not been listening. The barges came under tow. The mesh carried their life-sign telemetry back down the chain, through the floor, onto Bale's panel, where she watched 16,000 carrier tones stabilize one by one as the warship fed them power through the tow lines. Not 1 barge was lost. The platform that had killed us had grazed them 6 weeks of slow dying ago, and the responsible party, us, the Dominion, the proper recipient of their correctly aimed scream, had logged it and moved on, and the improper recipient, the network we had erased, had crossed half a sector and caught all 4. I should tell you what that did to the bridge of a declined warship, to watch it. I expected resentment, there was some, but mostly what moved through the 11,000 of us, as word spread down the canted decks that the humans were saving the barges and not us, was a thing harder to carry than resentment. It was shame. Quiet, procedural shipwide shame. The recognition that we were watching exactly the rescue we had screamed for, performed flawlessly, for people we had abandoned, by a network we had erased, and that the only reason it was not us under those tow lines was a clause we had written, ourselves, in a chamber with better light than it deserved 4 years before. The flag captain watched the whole thing without speaking. When the last barge stabilized, he said, only good, and I think it cost him more to say that 1 word than to give any order in his career, because it was the word of a man choosing to be glad of a rescue that was not his, performed by a network he had voted to destroy, for people his amendment had restored too late to matter. At 09:48 the floor came back to us. Splendor of Arath. The Velish barges are under tow and stable. 16,000 civilians, no losses. Your Second Amendment is on their record now, restoring their standing. It will travel with them to whatever world receives them. They will know an officer of the ship that struck them off also restored them at the end, asking nothing. We have made certain of that. Floor out. Then, 11 seconds later, before any of us could answer, the floor came back once more. And this is the transmission I have never read aloud to anyone, because it is the one that matters and I do not trust my voice with it. Splendor of Arath. We told you at 09:10 that we would not send a hull to you, and we will not. We are not on your giving roll. You wrote that. We keep it. That has not changed, and it will not. But a floor hears more than Maydays. We have heard your bridge for the last 40 minutes. We heard your flag restore the people he could not save instead of begging for himself. We heard your intelligence officer tell his captain the truth about your own document when a lie would have been easier. We heard 11,000 of you grieve people you had abandoned instead of envying the rescue you were denied. We log everything. We have logged that too. We will not give. But there is a difference between giving and telling, and you did not strike us from telling. Your nearest Dominion hull is no longer 19 hours out. We rebroadcast your position to your fleet at 0944, again at 0910, and we have been rebroadcasting it on a loop your relay cannot ignore ever since, with your exact state appended, in language your duty officers will be court-martialed for failing to act on. Your own fleet now knows precisely where you are, how many you are, and how long you have. A cruiser of your East March line broke formation 11 minutes ago. It will reach you in 4 hours, not 19. It is coming because we made it impossible for your own fleet to pretend it could not hear you, not because we sent it, but because we would not let your fleet do to you what your charter let you do to the barges. We did not save you. Your own people are saving you because we refuse to let them look away. That is the most we can give a flag that took us off the giving roll. We think it is enough. We think, if you sit with it, you will agree it is more honest than a tow line. We heard you, we declined you, and then we made certain you would be heard by the people who owed you. The role is yours, the lesson is yours. Floor out. The bridge did not cheer. A cruiser was 4 hours out instead of 19, which meant most of us would live, and the bridge did not cheer because the floor had just explained to us, in the flattest voice imaginable, exactly what it had done and exactly why, And there was no room in the explanation for triumph. The humans had not saved us. They had refused to save us by our own law, and then they had reached down the dead network with 2 centuries of patience and grabbed our own fleet by the collar and made it do the job we had, tried to outsource to the people we erased. They had honored our document and shamed our fleet in the same gesture, and they had told us, plainly, that the second thing was a gift and we should sit with it. I have sat with it for 9 years. I am still sitting with it. I think the floor was right. I think it was more honest than a tow line. The flag captain straightened one last time. "Bail," he said. "Open the channel." She opened it. "Areth floor," the captain said. "This is the flag of the splendor of Areth. We understand. We do not contest the decline, and we will not contest it before any tribunal of the Dominion, and I will say so, under my seal, to anyone who asks why a human floor let a Dominion carrier sit 4 hours for its own fleet. The answer is that we earned it, by vote, 4 years ago, and you simply kept the record straight. I have one question, and it is the only thing I will ask of you. 206 years on station, the Dominion struck your worlds off the rolls. We told you that you were irrelevant. We voted it in perpetuity. Why did you answer our Mayday at all? You owed us nothing. You could have stayed silent and been entirely within the document. Why did the floor say we hear you? The floor was quiet for a long time, 22 seconds by the log. Then the flat human voice answered the only question the flag captain of the splendor of Areth ever asked it. And the answer is the last thing I will give you in his words, because after it there is only the aftermath, and the aftermath is mine. The inquiry lasted 4 months, and I gave evidence on the 11th day, and I will tell you the part of it that the official record softened, because the official record is a kind of roll, too, and rolls leave things off. The board wanted above all to find a fault that was not the charter. This is what institutions do. A flag officer aimed a Mayday 1 digit wrong. There was a fault. A reactor went warm under tow with too cold. There was a fault. The ascendancy picket was pulled from Tesson 2, and the order crossed my desk, and I did not connect it. There was a fault, and it was mine, and I said so. The board liked that fault. It was procedural, it was assignable, it lived in a man and not in a document. They circled it for 2 days. They would have been content to hang the morning on Corvain Ith's failure to connect a picket reassignment, and I would have let them, because it was true, and because a man can carry a true fault. It was the flag captain who would not let them. He had survived. 9,400 of us had, and he stood in the chamber on the 3rd day and said, the thing that turned the inquiry from a search for a faulty man into a reckoning with a faulty roll, and it cost him his command to say it. "You are looking for the mistake that killed my ship," he said. "Here it is. The mistake was not the wrong digit saved us. You have the timestamps. The mistake was made in this building 4 years ago in better light by men who voted that a people who had done us no harm were irrelevant, and struck them from the rolls in perpetuity, and were proud of how thoroughly they did it. I was not in that chamber. I have read its record. The record is clean, and the vote was lawful, and it is the worst thing this Dominion has done in my lifetime, and I did not understand that until a station we erased declined to save my ship by my own law, and then saved everyone around my ship who had not voted to erase it. You want a faulty man. The faulty men are in your own archive, and some of them are in this room, and the document they signed is the thing that nearly killed 11,000 of us. Find that, or find nothing. They did not court-martial him for it. They retired him, which is the institutional way of agreeing with a man while punishing him for making you. He went without complaint. The last I heard he had taken a post at a colony school corward, teaching navigation, and that he keeps, on the wall of his classroom, a printed copy of the floor's 0910 transmission, The Decline, "We are honoring your document," and that when a student asks him what it is, he tells them it is the most important thing he ever read, and that it taught him the difference between a list of your freedoms and a list of your debts, and that he had spent his career unable to tell them apart. But the part of the inquiry I most need you to know is the part about the second caller. On the 9th day, an intelligence liaison from the Concordance, a neighboring power, no friend of the Dominions, present as an observer, asked to enter a transmission into the record. The board did not want it. It was not Dominion business. But the compact gave observers standing, and so it was read. It was a Mayday, not ours. It had been sent 8 months before the Splendor died, from a Concordance survey ship crippled in the rimward dark, and it had been aimed correctly at the Concordance's own rescue authority, and the Concordance's own rescue authority had, after due process, declined it. The survey ship was off charter, its mission unauthorized, its crew technically in violation, and so the Concordance, by its own clean lawful document, had let it die. 41 crew, off the rolls. By their own people. Exactly our story 8 months earlier in a different empire's chamber, except the survey ship had not died. The liaison read the rest of it into the record with a flat voice that I think was costing him a great deal. The survey ship's Mayday, aimed correctly at the concordance and declined correctly by the concordance, had also grazed, by a side lobe, by the same kind of accident that had sent our digit wrong, a human listening floor on the rimward mesh. And the human floor had done what the human floors do. It had heard. It had read the concordance's decline, which was lawful, and it had honored it the way it honored ours. The human floors do not contest sovereign roles. And then it had threaded a human survey ship of its own, one that kept a contract with the mesh, out to the crippled hull and taken off all 41 and carried them to a neutral port and logged the whole thing and rebroadcast the concordance's own decline alongside its own rescue flatly, asking nothing, so that the concordance's rescue authority would have to live with the document it had signed. We thought we were the only ones, the liaison said, to the chamber, breaking from the transcript. We thought our shame was ours alone. We came here as observers of the Dominion's embarrassment. We find it is not the Dominion's embarrassment, it is everyone's. Every power in this reach has at some point declined a lawful caller by its own clean document, and every one of those callers, if a side lobe was kind, was caught by the same human net, and every one of those rescues was logged and rebroadcast, asking nothing, telling everyone. The humans are not a power. We have been trying to assess them as a power for 2 centuries, and it has made fools of all our boards. The humans are a record. They are the galaxy's record of every call its proper recipients declined. And the record is growing, and it is patient, and it needs nothing from any of us, and one morning each of us, in turn, finds ourselves reading our own decline back to ourselves in a flat voice from a station we forgot was lit. The chamber was very quiet then, the way the bridge had been quiet at 0910. The board did not know what to do with the concordance transmission. It was not Dominion business, and it was the most important thing said in 4 months. They entered it into the record and moved on, because moving on is what boards do when they are shown a thing too large to vote on. I have thought about the liaison's words as much as I have thought about anything. The humans are a record. We had assessed them for 2 centuries as a fleet, and found them wanting because they had no fleet of consequence, and we had been right and useless. The way I am so often right and useless. We never thought to assess them as a witness. We never thought to ask how much power accrues to a thing that hears every decline call in the reach, honors every sovereign decline, saves every caller anyway by means it owes to no one, and rebroadcasts the decline beside the rescue flatly forever asking nothing. That is not a power you can deter because it wants nothing. That is not an enemy you can fight because it never raises a hand against you. It only tells the truth about you with timestamps on a loop. And there is no fleet in the reach, no armada the Dominion ever built, that can do to an empire what one flat true transmission from a forgotten floor did to ours. Make us read our own document back to ourselves in the worst hour of a dying ship and understand at last what we had written. The board's findings restored the human worlds to both roles, as I told you, and made it unrevocable, and recommended that no people be struck from the compact again without a review. The board declined to specify, because specifying it would have meant admitting how easily they had struck the humans off the first time. The findings did not mention the concordant ship. The findings did not mention the lifeboat the floor had threaded, or the Second Amendment the flag captain sent for the barges, or the 4 words the floor said at 09-2. The findings were clean. Rolls are clean. That is their danger. The thing the humans understood that we did not is that a clean document and a true one are not the same, and that a record which keeps everything, the decline and the rescue, the vote and the scream, the freedom and the debt, is the only role that cannot lie to you, and that the human floors had simply over 2 centuries made themselves into that record, and that no chamber's clean findings could ever overwrite it, because the floor keeps everything, and the floor is still on station, and the floor hears you whether you are on its rolls or not. Splendor of Arath, the floor said. You asked why we answered. Here is the answer, and it is the only one we have. A roll governs who we are obliged to. It does not govern who we hear. You struck us off the rolls. You did not strike us off our station. We are a listening floor. We listen. That is not an obligation you can vote away, because it is not an obligation. It is what we are. We heard your Mayday because you screamed, and we have ears, and there is no clause in any charter, yours or ours, that can make a thing with ears not hear a scream. What the roll governs is what we do after we hear. And what we did after we heard you was read your document, honor it, decline to give, and refuse to let your fleet pretend it was as deaf as your charter made us. We answered because we hear everything. We declined because you wrote that we must. We told your fleet because nobody can vote away the truth, and the truth was your position and your state, and your fleet did not get to not know it. You asked why we said we hear you, because you needed to know in the worst minute of your ship's life That the door you bolted 4 years ago still had someone behind it, not someone obliged to open it, someone who heard. We thought you should know that before we declined you. We thought a decline from a floor you knew was listening would teach you more than silence. From a floor you assumed was dead. We were right. We can hear from your bridge that we were right. Keep your roles, Splendor of Arath. Mend them or don't. That is sovereign business and not ours. But know this and put it in whatever archive your intelligence officer keeps. The human floors do not go off station because an empire votes us irrelevant. We were here 206 years before your charter, and we will be here when it is forgotten. You can take us off your list of who you owe. You cannot take yourselves off our list of who we hear. Nobody can. That is the one role no vote reaches. Your cruiser is 3 hours and 40 minutes out. We will keep your fleet honest until it arrives. Then we will go back to listening. We hear you, Splendor of Arath. We always did, floor out. And the floor went quiet and it did not speak to us again. And the channel to Tessin 9 stayed open and empty for 3 hours and 40 minutes. A thin, steady carrier tone from a station 2 centuries old, keeping the line lit while it kept our own fleet honest, the way it had kept the line lit for 4 years after we told it that it did not matter. The East March cruiser reached us at 13:31. It took our crew off in good order, 9,400 living by the final count. Of 11,000 who began the morning, the rest lost to the platform and the reactors in the cold. The cruiser's captain came aboard our wreck to take the flag's surrender of the hull as protocol requires, and the first thing he said, before the protocol was, we had your position from 0904. The relay flagged it as a low-priority charter dispute. By the time it reached a duty officer who looked twice, there was a human floor on every band we owned broadcasting your state on a loop and appending the regulation we'd be charged under for ignoring it. I have never been ordered to a rescue by a station that wasn't ours. I didn't enjoy it. I'm here because of it. Then he looked at the flag captain a long moment and said quieter, they wouldn't let us not come. You should know that. Whatever you did out here, the humans wouldn't let your own fleet leave you. Make of that what you will. The flag captain made of it the only thing an honest man could. At the inquiry, and there was an inquiry, there is always an inquiry, he did not blame the floor. He did not claim the humans had violated the compact. He stood up in a chamber with worse light than the one where we had struck them off, and he read the floor's transmissions into the record, all of them, including the decline, including we are honoring your document, and he said, the human floor did nothing to us that we did not write for ourselves. We voted that they could not give. They did not give. We voted them irrelevant. They proved the word does not mean what we thought it meant. A thing you have declared irrelevant can still hear you scream, and can still decline you by your own law, and can still shame your fleet into doing its duty, and can do all three in one morning without raising its voice. That is not irrelevance. I do not have the word for what that is. I recommend the board find it before it votes anyone off any role again. The board did not find the word. Boards rarely do. But they restored the human worlds to both roles of the Aerith Mutual Aid Compact, giving and receiving, that same session, and they made it unrevocable by any vote of convenience, and they did it not out of gratitude. The Dominion is not a grateful institution, but out of something closer to fear. The cold institutional understanding that we had built a machine for deciding who was worth saving, and a 200-year-old human listening floor had picked the machine up, read it back to us word for word, and operated it so flawlessly that 9,400 of us survived only because the machine, run correctly by the people we had erased, routed our own fleet to us against its will. The Velish barges made planetfall at a marginal world coreward, 16,000 civilians, no losses. The flag captain's second amendment traveled with them, as the floor had promised, and it is in their colony's founding record now, that they were struck off the rolls by the Dominion against their will, and restored by the flag of a dying carrier asking nothing, and carried the last 40 light minutes by a human warship that answered a phone on a network nobody believed still rang. The barge captain, I am told, kept the recording of the human floor's first transmission and plays it once a year on the date for the colony's children. 4 words. We hear you. The children are taught that it is the most powerful sentence a small and forgotten people can learn to say, and that the worlds that built the floors say it to everyone, obliged or not, because hearing is not a thing you can be voted out of. I left the service 2 years after the inquiry. I was an intelligence officer, I told you that. My whole profession was knowing where signals went and who would answer them. After the Splendor, I found I could no longer do the second half of the job because every report I wrote about who would and would not answer a given call now had a footnote in it that no board would let me file, which was, it depends on what you wrote about them 4 years ago and on whether they kept the document better than you did. I keep my own role now. It is short. It is the names of everyone I have personally struck off some list, in some chamber, with some clean copy for the archive, in the years before I understood what a roll was. The Velish 16,000 are on it. The 4,100 of my own crew who did not survive the morning are on it, because I aimed nothing and corrected nothing and let one wrong digit stand while a man I had breakfast with died at the rail. I read it sometimes. It does not bring anyone back. But I have come to believe the human floors are right that there is one roll no vote reaches, the roll of who you can still hear, and that the only freedom worth the name is the freedom to answer it, and the only shame worth carrying is having voted in good light that you would not. They are still on station. I checked before I sat down to write this. The Aerith floor at Tessin 9, 215 years now, the same thin carrier tone, listening to a sector the Dominion still mostly ignores, obliged to no one, hearing everyone. I sent them a single transmission last year on the old band, not as an officer, just as a man. I said the only thing I had any right to say to a floor I had once helped erase. I said, "We did not aim our Mayday at you. You heard it anyway. Thank you for the decline." It taught me more than a rescue would have. The floor answered in 19 seconds, the way it answered the captain's stall 9 years ago, like a thing that had been waiting. It said, "We hear you. We always did. Floor out."